Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank first our witnesses for being here today. I want to make three observations. First, I agree with our chair that one way to reduce inflation is to increase your labor force participation rate. The more people looking for jobs and obtaining those jobs, the better. If you don't have a job, you're not healthy, you're not happy, and you're not free. It's just that simple. Because I think human experience is such that most people understand that doing is more satisfying than having. Government can give you things, but you feel better about yourself when you can earn them and support your family and be a meaningful part of the community. I do worry about our labor force participation rate. It hasn't recovered from the pandemic. There are a variety of reasons for that. Some of our people decided to retire. But I think some of our people have, well, I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to the problem. Some say that it is our generous government benefits, and certainly our benefits were increased during COVID, but those are starting, the increases are starting to dissipate. Logically, you should see more people going back to work. So I think increasing the labor force participation rate for child care workers and for all Americans is a win-win-win. Number two, let me say a word about inflation, and then I'll say something about child care. There are a number of reasons for the inflation that we have now. Certainly the war in Ukraine has contributed to it. We've seen the increases in commodity prices. We've seen the increases in agricultural exports. I mean, both Ukraine and Russia are big exporters of food, sunflower oil, for example, wheat. The lockdowns in China have had a huge impact in terms of inflation. I confess I don't understand the Communist Party of China's approach trying to get control of COVID. Maybe it'll work. I don't think it will ultimately. But it certainly had an impact on supply chains. In my opinion, the two biggest causes of inflation that we're seeing right now in the United States, and this inflation predates the war, certainly, are loose monetary policy and, for lack of a better way of saying it, loose fiscal policy. The current inflation that we have now has characteristics of both cost push inflation and demand pull. And I won't go into all of the characteristics of the loose monetary policy that we've had. We had to loosen our monetary policy in order to survive the slowdown from COVID. But I think even the Federal Reserve, if it were represented here today, would tell you that they didn't take inflation seriously enough, soon enough. They should have started tightening monetary policy. They should have taken their foot off the accelerator of the quantitative easing, and they should have raised interest rates sooner. But I think the other part of that equation is the loose fiscal policy, if you will. We had to spend a lot of money during COVID to keep the economy afloat and to keep our people afloat. We spent $7 trillion, probably more, but I think that's a pretty accurate figure. In my opinion, the last 1.9 trillion was not necessary. The president said it was an emergency COVID bill. I didn't see the emergency. The spending was going to occur over 10 years. I didn't see much. I think of the 1.9 trillion, 80 billion of it was spent on public health. But the point is, and it wasn't just that bill, it was the accumulation. $7 trillion is a lot of money. It's clear to me, I don't think this will happen, but what we ought to do as a United States Congress right now is free spending. freeze all spending. I'm not saying don't spend any money. We have a budget. Don't increase that budget. That's the amount of money we're going to spend. What's in our budget, period. Freeze spending except for defense spending. And give the Federal Reserve the chance to do its job. Now, I don't live in La La Land. That's not likely to happen. Right now, there's a discussion of a China bill. We need to spend, I'm told by the advocates, $250 billion to $400 billion to compete with China, which I see the bill primarily as a subsidy for big tech. But that's just one person's point of view. So those are my thoughts on inflation. Let me say a word about child care. Yes, child care is very expensive, and it's a real burden for especially for middle income and lower income Americans. And I am all for putting our heads together and trying to figure out how to reduce the cost. Here's what I've never seen the wisdom of, though. President Biden, in his Build Back Better bill, basically said his solution to reducing the cost of child care is to have the federal government take it over, have the federal government make it twice as expensive. If you're going to pay child care workers like you pay school teachers, you're going to spend a lot more money. And once the federal government takes it over and makes it twice, in some cases 3 times as expensive, we're going to send the bill to the American people. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's not a solution. That's just prolonging the problem. And that, for what it's worth, is my point of view. We're in the middle of a vote. If I have to leave, I'll come back, but we've got another vote at some point. But and I didn't mean to talk that long, but let me thank you again for coming today. Time out. Senator Warren had to take an emergency phone call, so we're going to wait a few minutes. Okay? Well, shoot, I'm just going to keep talking then. Why? I would be interested in hearing from you today about any thoughts you have specifically on child care. What we can do to try to reduce the cost. I mean, it is very expensive. And when in a world where both parents either choose or have to work in order to support their family, it does become a factor. And I think it's something worth pursuing. And I could see the wisdom of having the federal government and asking the American taxpayer to do its part. If child care is really a priority for the Congress, and I think it ought to be. But here's what never happens around here. I don't think any fair-minded person believes there is not waste in the federal budget. There clearly is. It clearly is. Now, the federal budget is a little bit like a cow. There's fat on a cow, but it's not at the very end of the cow or in the very middle of the cow. It's marbled throughout. And so reducing spending to find money for child care would require us to do a lot of hard work and to look at every single program and ask if that program has metrics, and if most of them don't. And if it does have metrics, ask if the program is meeting its metrics. That, to me, would be a rational approach. That's not what I think is going to happen. I can tell you, and I'm not just going to pick on my Democratic friends. There's no appetite for that on the Republican side. the folks on my side talk a really good game. We need to reduce spending and get rid of the wasted spending. And you say, okay, let's go. And they say, oh, well, not just yet. It's like going to heaven. They all want to go to heaven, but they're not ready to make the trip just yet. And that's the problem we have. And I think if we spent a reasonable amount of time taking a look at our federal spending, including defense. Look, I'm going to say it again. We need to freeze spending. But we're going to have to, in this world, we're going to have to spend more on defense. But I do find it somewhat embarrassing that the Department of Defense has never been audited. Never been audited. Anyway, I have stalled long enough. The chair is back, and she will introduce our witnesses.
Good.
Mr. Rowen, what do you propose? Is it Rowen or I can't see that? I'm sorry.
Yes, it's Rowen.
What do you your employees have trouble finding affordable child care?
That's correct.
What do you think we ought to do about the problem?
Well, as I said in my introductory opening, there have been solutions over the years. My mother was involved in an organization that created a nonprofit child care operation. It worked on pay by need. It did have it used funds from the United Way, which were charitable funds. But I also believe that it needs more government funding to keep the economic model for
you think the American taxpayer needs to subsidize child care?
I believe if correctly explained, the American taxpayer would understand that an investment by the government in good child care would dramatically improve the economic condition of all of our small businesses and corporate businesses, right, to the point where we would have a bigger, larger workforce, which would be more productive, more stable, and everybody would benefit. So the value of the investment, as a business owner, I understand investment. The value of that investment would be far greater than the cost of it today. And if explained properly to the American public, they would understand.
How many employees do you have?
I run between 50 and 75 to 85.
Okay. What does a starting employee make in your company?
2 years ago, $9 an hour. Today, about $12 an hour. Minimum wage in Pennsylvania is $7.25.
So the starting pay for a person in your company
today, when they walk in,
$12 an hour.
That's what I have to be paying to get somebody.
Well, of course they can't afford health care. Child care.
Are you insinuating I'm paying too little?
How much money did you take out of your company last year? What was your salary?
My personal salary was $100,000.
Okay. Did you take out any money? And are you an LLC?
I'm a subchapter S corporate.
Okay, you're a sub S. So
yes,
you took out some. In addition to your salary, you had to pay taxes. So presumably you took out profits. How much did you take out there?
My company lost over $300,000 last year.
Okay. So your total take from your company was $100,000.
Actually, my total take, because as a subchapter S, my business income is my income,
right,
was negative $200,000.
Okay. So you had is that aberrational, or does that?
I hope so.
Yeah. Well,
yes, it is.
Pre-pandemic, how much did you take out?
My average over, say, a 25-year period of time for my company has been somewhere between the profit for the company, that is then we pay taxes on, right, has been somewhere between $45,000 and maybe $150,000 to $200,000.
Okay. Well, look, I'm not trying to pick on you, and congratulations on having a family business. Let me just give you this point of view. Of course, child care is too expensive. Everybody up here wants less expensive child care. Everybody up here supports children and prosperity, too. Now, here's a rational way to go about it. It's probably not the way Congress will go about it, but it is a rational way. There's some things you can't quantify. You can't quantify the self well-being of having a job. I don't care how much money government gives you. You can't quantify the feeling of self-worth that a person receives from being gainfully employed and supporting his or her family and being a meaningful part of his community. Follow me here.
Senator, I would like to add one thing.
Sure.
I've been in my business for over 45 years. I'm in a small business community. I know every one of my employees, and I can quantify with them, when I look them in the eye, what a good job means.
Right.
And I watch them cry when they can't come to work because they don't have childcare.
I understand. So there's a part of this you can't quantify, in my opinion. I meant what I said earlier. A person without a job is not healthy, that person's not happy, and that person is not free. And yeah, government can give you a cell phone, but you're going to feel much better about yourself if you earn the money to buy a cell phone. Okay? There is a part of this you can quantify. A rational approach, therefore, would be to say, okay, if government subsidized the cost of child care in America, what would that mean in terms of GDP? How many additional people would go to work? How many fewer lost my child is sick days would we have in America? What would be the impact on productivity? All that can be quantified. And you take that number, the cost, or the benefit rather, and you compare it to the cost. And if the benefit substantially outweighs the cost, you would go forward. The question would then become, how do you pay for it? Well, if we say this is a priority, a meaningful place to start, if you respect taxpayer dollars, and we all do, is to say, okay, we're going to comb through our budget. We're going to basically scrub our budget before we just go borrow more money and try to find out what in our current budget is a lower priority than affordable child care. We never do that. We never do that. I mean, we just don't do that. Neither side does that. When we put together a budget, Mr. Bowen, we don't do it like you do at your business. Our fight over a budget is how much extra money we're going to give to the bureaucracy every year. We don't have any metrics. In the real world, if you're doing a lousy job, you get fired. In government, if you're doing a lousy job, it must mean that you don't have enough money, so we give you more money. That's the way it works. Let me just finish my thought. So that would be a rational play. And then once we really try to scrub the budget and find the money, then if it's not enough, given our other competing priorities, we could talk about, well, is this something that we ought to add on an operating expense and borrow money? That would be a rational way. But that's not what is before us. What is before us, let me just take the President's Build Back Better plan. You know what the child care provision is and that would cost? $75 billion a year. What do you think that's going to do to inflation? And that's not $75 billion that we could find by scrubbing the budget. That's not touching the budget. Nobody wants to touch the budget. We just want to add to it. We don't even have 5% of $75 billion. We got to go borrow that. Do you see the problem? I don't think anybody has, at least I don't have, a problem with the end result, with the objective here. But the answer is not just to say, oh, okay, we'll just add $75 billion a year extra to our operating account based on the assumption that all the money we're spending right now is well spent, and yeah, we'll just borrow more. That's not the answer. And it wasn't the answer before inflation, but let me tell you what will happen right now if we go past Build Back Better. And there's some good things in Build Back Better. You know the impact of that on inflation? You think 8.5% inflation is high? Get ready for 15% inflation. And that's the problem. Anyway, that's the end of my speech.
You mentioned that in business, we don't do things like government. And that's very true. I might have lost money last year, but then make a decision this year to spend $50,000 on a piece of equipment that I can't afford, so I have to borrow for it. But I know that that $50,000 worth of equipment will make $300,000 worth of equipment or products that I will make $50,000 in profit. So I will pay for that piece of equipment in 1 year and then own that equipment for 10 years and make $50,000 every year after that. So I make $500,000 because I make an investment that is the correct one at the right time. It's not.
I bet you the first thing you do, though, is you don't just assume that you need to go borrow the money to buy that equipment. The first thing you do is sit down with your operating budget and see if you can't find a place to cut. That's the first thing you do.
We do that all the time, absolutely.
Well,
and I agree with you.
We don't. We don't. And that's the problem.
Thank you.